This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
This is Global Business. Hello and welcome to the show. I am Peninah Karibe, and as always, we begin with a look at the markets. The Nigerian Stock Exchange ended the day in positive territory. This followed the market's appointment of its Cycle 2 product advisory committees across different product lines, that is equities, fixed income, exchange-traded funds, and derivatives. Now, the committees are made up of renowned professionals with expertise, experience, and footprint in local and global financial markets. They will support and advise the exchange on emerging trends in the areas of product development and market structure. Coming up on the show tonight, East African Community budget delayed as Kenya and Tanzania squabble. Aliko Dangote's audacious bet on an oil refinery in Nigeria. And the Nigerian company that's using telemedicine to enable safe doctor and patient interaction amid the coronavirus. And we start off this bulletin tonight in East Africa. Uncertainties continue to loom over the delayed tabling of the East African Community's budget for the 2020-2021 financial year. The cancellation is attributed to a lack of quorum after Kenyan legislators to the East African Legislative Assembly boycotted the virtual sitting. The aborted session was to debate the proposed $29.4 million mini budget for the bloc, known as the vote on account. According to the EALA rules of procedure, the House would only hold a session when a minimum of 3 members from each partner state are participating. The development comes as Kenya and Tanzania remain locked in a standoff over treatment of passengers from either country. The House is now expected to virtually convene today at 10 p.m. That's about in an hour, less than an hour from now, East African time. Okay, so let's get more details on this from CGTN's Daniel Kijo. He's live for us in Dar es Salaam. Daniel, a lack of quorum yesterday pushed the parliament sitting to today at 10 p.m. East African time. That's in an hour's time. Is the meeting still on course?
Hi, Peninah. Well, what I do know is that indeed they did meet on Tuesday, again on Wednesday and yesterday. On Tuesday, like you said, there was no representative from the Kenyan delegation, a maximum of 9 members and a minimum of 3 members, like you said. Now, what we know is that yesterday the speaker said that they will hold a meeting only after they talk to Kenya, because after Tuesday not showing up, there was only one representative from Kenya who came yesterday. So now the speaker has said that they would wait until Kenya explains why they did not send a representative. But what I know is that from all the other member states, they had at least a minimum 3. Some member states had 4 members, others 5, others 6. Yeah, we're waiting to hear and find out exactly when the meeting will be held again. So I assume that there will be no meeting in an hour's time, as you said. Okay, so 9 legislative representatives from Kenya, 9, Daniel, and not a single one of them showed up for that virtual meeting yesterday. Has it been established why there was no single representative from Kenya? Well, the first meeting was, like I said, on Tuesday, and indeed 9 members are not there, but it has not been established as of yet why. Now, there was only another 1 representative the day after, and we don't know why the Kenyan MPs boycotted the session. But these further delays of approval for this very important budget, because as you know, the EAC is very cash strapped right now, and we know that, like you said, a maximum of 9 members from each state were supposed to be, but at least a minimum of 3. So it's a bit challenging to pass a budget if there was not a representative of all the members. However, the seating will not proceed as it stands, and this important budget, the 20-something million that you just mentioned, would not be passed, and this vote on account money would be needed for the first quarter of 2021 budget. So there's still no reason. The speaker is looking to talk to Kenya and find out exactly what has caused the 9 members not being there on the first day, and then again only 1 representative on the second second day as well. So as we know, no reason has been given yet.
Okay, so no show yesterday for Kenya, one representative so far from Kenya. So that looks like, as you mentioned, perhaps there won't be any debate taking place tonight. Are there any house rules that govern parliamentary sittings to manage situations such as what we're seeing today and what we saw yesterday, lack of quorum?
Well, Peninah, indeed, like you said, the House of Representatives requires a minimum amount of members to proceed, whether billing or passing a budget. Now, there has to be a minimum of 3 MPs from each partner state to be participating in the assembly. Also, there will be no bill that can be passed in the East African community that can be tabled or debated if indeed this number of 3 MPs per partners has not been reached. Now, we know that this aborted session that we talked about now was to debate on the $29 million of the mini budget that was to be passed, the vote on account budget, as you said, for the first month. And this, again, necessitates, it was a very necessary meeting because of the dwindling coffers. The budget, the accounts of the EAC community are not in a good shape. So this was a meeting that was meant to change that and discuss that. So the procedure indeed is very clear that a minimum of 3 member states, 3 MPs per each member state have to be present for the budget to be passed. So as we stand here today, as we talk now, that budget has not been passed, and we're still waiting to find out what would be the next steps.
All right, Daniel, thank you for that update. Daniel Kija live in Dar es Salaam. Now, the United States has withdrawn some funding to Ethiopia as the Grand Renaissance Dam dispute rages on. The decision comes days after U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visited Sudan and asked the parties to work towards a mutual agreement on the filling of the dam. Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia have resumed online negotiations seeking to end the dam dispute. The talks are being mediated by the African Union. The continental body seeks to resolve a years-long dispute over Ethiopia's giant hydroelectric dam. Ethiopia has built the dam on the Blue Nile and has started filling the reservoir. Both Egypt and Sudan say the construction will have profound effects on their own water supplies from the Nile River. Years of talks between Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan with a variety of mediators, including the Trump administration, have failed to produce a solution. Now, Africa's richest man, according to Forbes magazine, Aliko Dangote, plans to spend more than his net worth of $13.5 billion building one of the world's biggest oil refineries in Nigeria. This move has the potential to revolutionize Nigeria's economy, with its operations adding $13 billion, or 2.3% to the gross domestic product. Now, Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele has said that the project could employ more than 70,000 people when operational. Nigeria's largest ever industrial project boasts a distillation column for separating crude into various fuels at different temperatures. That is the largest of its kind in the world. The 650,000 barrel per day refinery is just a part of a $15 billion petrochemical complex that will also house a gas processor and the world's biggest plant for ammonia and urea, which are used in making plastics and fertilizer. Now let's cross over to Deji Badmas for more on this. He's live in Nigeria's financial capital, Lagos. Deji, this is a huge project that could potentially transform Nigeria's economic fortunes. What more do we know about it, and when will it be complete?
Well, Peninah, just as you've been saying, it's a massive project, massive indeed, that the government too is supporting it. And you know, people often talk about the fact that it's at 650,000 barrel per day capacity refinery, but it goes beyond that. You did mention the fact that you would also have a gas processor right in there. You also have a fertilizer plant. So it's really massive. And when you consider the way it's going to boost the economic activities around the area where this refinery is located, that's at the Lekki Free Trade Zone in Lagos. Apart from the number of jobs it's going to provide, we're talking about the indirect impact it's going to have on the economy of that area, and especially Lagos as a whole. It's indeed massive. Well, the initial plan was to complete the project in 2019, but then it was shifted to 2020, and now the Dangote, the management of Dangote group now says because of COVID-19, the completion date will now be 2021. But then there are experts who are saying there's even a likelihood that 2021 may not be achievable, that we might just be looking at 2023 before the refinery comes on stream. But no matter how long it takes, the most important thing is that within the next year or two, this refinery will come on stream, and it will definitely change the whole equation in terms of Nigeria's petrol consumption. As you know, Peninah, Nigeria imports the bulk of the petrol it consumes, and that is costing the country so much of money. We're talking about around $7.5 billion per year. So as soon as this refinery comes on stream, then fuel importation will effectively stop, and Dangote will take over the market, not just in Nigeria, but even beyond Nigeria, across the Western Central African region. So it's very massive, and everyone is banking on this refinery to help turn the economy of Nigeria around.
I mean, if this project succeeds, Deji, it could add $13 billion, 2.3% to Nigeria's GDP. And like you mentioned, the impact is not just within Nigeria, but as well other African economies. So is the Nigerian government giving Dangote any incentives for this project?
Absolutely, absolutely. The government has been quite supportive, and you know, the NNPC the group margin director of the NNPC, for instance, some time ago said, look, the government is not just providing not just incentives, but the government is providing fiscal support as well. I am aware that Dangote, for instance, gets waivers in terms of imports of machinery and what have you. And then the government has also pledged to provide support in terms of feedstocks and off-takers as well. So in terms of the crude oil that Dangote would be getting to run this refinery, the government, of course, has pledged that it's going to ensure that it continues to provide crude now to the refinery. And then off-takers as well, the government has given that guarantee. So it means there's already a market for Dangote. There is a huge market for Dangote here in the country. And in terms of the primary raw materials now that he would need, which is crude oil, that would not be a problem because the government has given the support. Of course, it's not as if he's going to buy the crude oil for free from the country. But then the mere fact that the government is giving it that support, that it would ensure that, for instance, he's considered first in terms of crude supply, that is something massive. So the government has been quite supportive. And to be candid, the government wants to see this project come on stream so that it's able to bail it out of this issue of petrol subsidy that we've been dealing with for ages now. So in terms of support, it's getting more than enough support from the government, and the government wants to see the project come alive.
All right, so let's talk about the risks then of involving or indulging in such a project, because this is not Dangote's first venture into the refining business. He tried in 2007, it didn't work out for him. And he's also doing this, Deji, at a time oil prices have tanked, and this is squeezing refining margins. And then, of course, there is the oil cartels in Nigeria. They have dominated the fuel import business for more than 2 decades now. So with all of these factors at play, what strategy do they have to make sure this billion-dollar project succeeds?
Let's start with the oil import business. You're right. You have a cartel that has dominated that market for quite a long time. But then the government, at the moment, the government is a sole importer of petrol into this country. So if the government is providing that support and says, look, we are going to support this refinery to work, it means what the government intends to do is that as soon as this refinery comes up and starts running, the government will definitely stop the importation of petrol and then would have to rely on Dangote refineries to supply the domestic market here. So that's something positive. I do not see the cartel as any threat at all because somehow the back of the cartel has been broken by the government, which is now taking over the importation of petrol. Now, the other part is that, yes, it is true that the margins are down at the moment, of course, as a result of the global pandemic and then because of what you have with OPEC and OPEC Plus. But the truth is that, look, prices will not continue to remain down forever. And Dangote is hedging its bet on that prices will definitely go up. But beyond prices as well, beyond the margins, Dangote is also hoping, as I said earlier, that if it's able to capture not just the Nigerian market now, but the whole of the Central and West African market, that is something huge. So you're looking at the economy of scale, even when the margins are small, but if it has a very huge market, then that's something huge. And in fact, the head, that's the managing director of the refinery, even said there are plans to export gas, for instance, to Europe and Latin America and what have you. So if the refinery is able, if Dangote is able to capture all of those markets, even when the price of petrol, even when the price of crude is low and the margins are low, it will still be able to make up with the economy of scale. And then let's not forget, Peninah, this refinery, yes, it's a 650,000 barrel refinery, barrel per day now, but it's not just going to be producing petrol. It has a gas processor there. It will be producing fertilizer as well. So those are areas that the company is hoping it will be able to make huge amount of money from. For instance, it intends to become the sole producer of fertilizer across West and Central Africa. That is something that, so that is what the company is actually looking at beyond petrol now. So it's a very strategic move, and I think, well, Mr. Dangote has actually got, he's actually put his mouth where his money is, and I don't see how things would actually go wrong for him. I think it's worth all the risk, and he's seen the potential, and that's why he's decided to take the risk. And everyone knows the price of oil will not continue to remain down. Things will, the price will definitely go up, but then the market is also there, and that's the market that he's hoping now to exploit.
All right, Deji, thank you for breaking it down for us. Deji Badmas live in Lagos. In some corporate headlines, Nigerian lawmakers are ordering a probe into the alleged tampering of dividends from the government's investment in Nigerian liquefied natural gas between 2004 and 2019. The payments total an estimated $18 billion. The directive follows disclosures made by a top official at the public hearing on the revenue generation drive for the 2021-2023 financial year. Kenya Airways' net loss for the 6 months ending June 2020 has widened by 67.3% to $132 million. Passenger numbers dropped by 55.5% to 1.1 million, in contrast with 2.4 million over the same period last year. The pre-tax loss for the 6 months also rose by over 160% to $195 million. This follows the grounding of aircraft for most of the second quarter of the year amid coronavirus disruptions. Glencore Holdings might consider selling its entire 73.1% stake in Zambia's Mopani copper mines to the government rather than becoming a minority stakeholder. Glencore's plans to put Mopani on care and maintenance prompted the Zambian government to threaten revoking the firm's mining licenses. The move by the government's investing arm to take control of Mopani is part of its strategy to shift away from minority stakes and towards running mines as an operator. And United Airlines is expected to cut an estimated 2,850 pilot jobs this year amid the devastating impact of the coronavirus pandemic on air travel. The furloughs are expected to go ahead if it fails to secure more aid from the U.S. government. The company is seeking another $25 billion to cover the employee payroll through March. That's a look at your corporate news. You're watching Global Business, still ahead. Young people in Tunisia see opportunities in agriculture as the coronavirus ravages jobs. And a baby dolphin found off the coast of Mauritius as more carcasses are washed ashore.
Every story starts out like this.
We'll head up now.
Beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? and why.
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sue. Hello, Nairobi.
This
Well, of course.
is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business. The COVID-19 pandemic has created multiple shocks to supply chains and pushed food prices upwards. But the crisis has, on the upside, accelerated the progress of investment in agriculture by Africa's youth. With prospects of formal employment further eroded, agriculture is turning out to be a key source of employment for the youth. From Tunisia, here's Adnet Shawashi with more details.
Brahim Trabilsi is a farmer in Tunisia's northeastern region of Manouba. Amid the outbreak of the deadly pandemic, which interrupted economic activities in the North African nation, Trabilsi was among the farmers that toiled through the crisis to ensure there was no shortage of food by accelerating production of fruits and vegetables.
All sectors are affected by the coronavirus crisis. Young farmers worked hard despite the high risk of infection. They turned their focus on cultivating land and provided agricultural produce for millions of Tunisians who were confined at home during the lockdown.
During the peak of the crisis, the landowner did not leave his farm. For more than 2 months, he worked for 18 hours a day to boost his production and revenues.
The production, transport and distribution cost was up 20% during the pandemic. This did not deter us from waking up early to work. At the same time, many unemployed youth looked at agriculture as a job to earn a decent living and source of food.
The Agriculture and Food Security Committee at the Tunisian Parliament has urged the government to support thousands of youths who are working in the agricultural fields.
The agricultural sector contributes around 14% of the Tunisia's GDP. It employs some 50,000 people. Unlike other sectors, the coronavirus pandemic did not paralyze agriculture. The distribution continued and all the agricultural produce was available. Young farmers seized the opportunity to grow in this period. Our role is to support them.
During a recent visit to the region of Jandouba, northwest of Tunisia, President Kais Saied thanked the local farmers for ensuring supply chains were not affected. The head of state said that agricultural workers, especially women, made significant sacrifices during the health crisis to ensure that production is not interrupted throughout the country. Agriculture is one of the main pillars of the Tunisian economy. It is one of the few vital sectors which remained active since March 2020. In fact, local agricultural production and distribution channels were not affected negatively by the pandemic. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Following consultations between the First Lady of China, Professor Peng Liyuan, and the Organization of African First Ladies for Development, the Chinese government will provide more assistance, including medical supplies, to all African states. CGTN's Angela Coppola has the details.
The First Lady of China, Professor Peng Liyuan, and her South African counterpart, Dr. Tsepo Motsepe, know each other well and have had good ties.
They share the same aspiration, to the preschool education. They share the same aspiration, to the development cause of women and children.
The South African First Lady Dr. Motsepe is the patron of the Early Care Foundation, which provides support programs for home-based care centres in disadvantaged communities. The organisation will be the main beneficiary of the donation.
It will help with the screening of the children as they arrive in the schools. It will also help with the adults, the teachers working at the centres, to always wear their masks when they're interacting with the children.
The donation includes 18,000 disposable masks and 120 forward temperature guns. The embassy has also pledged to provide another 50,000 disposable surgical masks.
It's also going to help the Early Care Foundation because they are the people who are dealing with the minors, our future president, our future generations for the coming years. So we need to keep them protected and keep them safe.
This donation is one of many, and it shows the strong relationship between the two First Ladies from China and from South Africa. And it's not the end of the donations or the cooperation.
To donate 1 million rand earlier next month to the Department of Basic Education to help them to build up facilities, like water tanks, this kind of stuff, to help to sanitize the young students.
Podcasting is quickly gaining popularity after being launched almost 2 decades ago. Today, it brings millions of different offerings to listeners worldwide. In South Africa, it has reached a new level and now gives the deaf community an opportunity to enjoy the audio files uploaded on different platforms. Sumitra Naidu takes a look.
In history, the beginning of season 2. And
a podcast is a digital audio file that a user can download to a personal device for easy listening. How then does a deaf person enjoy a podcast? Thuli Zikalala, an accredited interpreter in South Africa, collaborated with Cliff Central, a digital radio platform, to produce the very first sign language interpreted podcast.
Castle of Bran, Vlad Dracul had impaled 20,000.
This is a big responsibility in terms of bringing awareness to organizations and to digital online platforms to say that your content is amazing, it's a wealth of knowledge, but it's a big barrier to, an entire community. It's very limited, a lot of content is presented in a specific way, or even limited. They don't have the option to choose.
So the blind history, the beginning of season.
For each episode, Zikalala takes the audio and shoots a video over it, interpreting the content in sign language, making it a visual element. For Zikalala, this is a breakthrough for the deaf community.
Content in its entirety is not designed for deaf people. It's not designed for people who've got hearing problems or hard of hearing, because it's spoken. I'm a podcast as a whole. Like, people speak, so they don't consider subtitles. They don't consider having an interpreter.
Thank you, Thuli, for your continued hard work of posting your videos on your statuses. One suggestion could be sharing more of your videos on Instagram or Facebook to get wider reach.
I guess, we as interpreters, we have a very important and a big responsibility in terms of bridging information. So we take information from one culture and we have to make sure that it's accessible to another culture.
Podcasts are becoming so popular that they're even starting to compete with traditional media. According to Edison Research, 10% of all metropolitan South Africans listen to any podcast in a typical month. It's still a far way off from the 33% of people in the United States, but the figures are rising steadily and starting to become more inclusive with these new deaf podcasts. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Fishermen and activists have recovered a dead baby dolphin off the coast of Mauritius. The mammal was found near an area affected by an oil spill from a Japanese boat. Environmentalists are urgently seeking an explanation for the mysterious deaths of at least 40 dolphins that washed ashore on Wednesday and Thursday in the area. 2 dolphins were examined this week. They have wounds on their bodies but have no trace of oil, according to preliminary autopsy results. The autopsy results on the other dolphins are expected in the coming days. You're watching Global Business, still ahead after the break. A look at Japan Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's brain after he announced his resignation, and how 5G technology is developing in China.
again began holding guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me. Recapping other headlines at this hour, members of the Economic Community of West African States have insisted on a return to civilian rule in Mali. This transitional government should last no longer than 12 months, according to the regional leaders' agreement. The military is currently in charge in Mali after ousting President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta on the 18th of this month. Police in Uganda have confirmed an incident in which 10 teenagers were killed by lightning in the northwestern part of the country. It has been described as the worst lightning accident in the country in nearly a decade. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights says the life of a Congolese doctor who won a Nobel Peace Prize in 2018 is in danger after a series of death threats. The High Commissioner has called for an impartial investigation into the threats received by Dr. Denis Mukwege. And Egypt has, for the first time since March, allowed mosques to hold congregational Friday prayers. The weekly Islamic service usually sees millions of Muslims gather in mosques across the country. The decision was welcomed by worshippers who had to observe strict COVID-19 preventive measures. Shinzo Abe is stepping down as Prime Minister of Japan over health concerns. The 65-year-old has been battling ulcerative colitis, an inflammatory bowel disease, for years, and he says his worsening condition has made it difficult for him to continue his job. Grace Lee reports from Tokyo.
To a room full of reporters, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe once again announces his resignation.
I really struggled to make this decision. I see the downward trend in coronavirus infections in July, and also towards the winter, the necessary measures have been put together. Therefore, under the new leadership, the challenge should be addressed, and this is the only timing in which the leadership change should happen.
It comes after weeks of speculation about his health. He'd made multiple visits to a hospital, though the official line was that they were simply regular checkups. Shinzo Abe suffers from ulcerative colitis, an intestinal disease which also forced him to step down during his first tenure as Prime Minister in 2007. At the press conference, the Prime Minister spoke at length about the pandemic and talked about his regrets in Japan's COVID response. He also apologized for not being able to achieve some of his key goals as leader, such as resolving the Russian territorial dispute and bringing back abductees from the DPRK.
I needed to fight against the disease and be treated, and I was not really in a perfect state in terms of health conditions, and still I had to make important political decisions. I cannot make any mistakes in terms of important decision making. The support of the public, I needed to respond to this with confidence. I cannot do this, and I made a decision to not continue my job as the Prime Minister.
But the announcement of his resignation was not a complete surprise.
Although it was sudden, I guess you could also say that there's been some preparation underway for the last couple of weeks. Recently, his aides started to deliberately disseminate the information that his health conditions were deteriorating, and people were left to speculate whether he was doing that in order to draw attention or sympathy, or was he getting so ill that there was already a countdown towards his resignation.
For now, Abe says he won't appoint an interim prime minister and remain in office until a successor is chosen. There will be a political scramble to fill Mr. Abe's seat within the governing Liberal Democratic Party. Shinzo Abe's term was set to expire in September 2021. Grace Lee, CGTN, Tokyo.
Shinzo Abe has served the longest uninterrupted term as Prime Minister in the country's history. Let's take a look at his political career.
Shinzo Abe, a third-generation politician, first taking office as Prime Minister in 2006. Abe is the first Japanese government leader born after the Second World War. During his first term, scandals surrounded his cabinet. Support rate dropped as low as 28%, and the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, or the LDP, suffered a major loss in the upper house election in 2007. He resigned soon after, citing poor health and saying his presence was hindering the passage of essential bills. He was blamed for creating the so-called revolving door of prime ministers, 6 leaders in 6 years, until his second term began in 2012. Ironically, he had since become the longest-serving prime minister in Japanese history. Experts say the reform of multi-seat electoral districts and changes to campaign finance rules weakened the traditional factional influences in the LDP. Abe secured an unchallenged leadership in the ruling party. He gained public support with promises of an economic recovery. The so-called Abenomics was based on 3 arrows of monetary easing, fiscal stimulus and structural reforms. The public was desperate to crawl out of the prolonged deflation from the earthquake and tsunami that devastated the eastern coast of Japan. Corporate sentiments improved and Nikkei stock average made a steady recovery, more than doubling to over 23,000 in 2020 since he began his second term, despite inertia from the 2008 global recession. Analysts say Abe was cunning in balancing economic achievements, social welfare schemes, and aggressive diplomacy to boost Japanese exports, which maintained public support, while forcefully passing a number of unpopular security and defense-related bills. Tens of thousands have taken to the streets demanding him to step down. There was an anti-nuclear power demonstrations in 2014, followed a year later by protests over so-called war legislations in 2015, and favoritism scandal in 2018. But despite these, he managed to win in elections and maintaining a clear majority in both the upper and lower houses. In 2017, after President Donald Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Trans-Pacific talks, Abe tried to take the lead in the negotiations. He also tried to build stronger trade cooperations with China and another free trade agreement in the Asian Pacific, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Although Abe continued to stress the importance of the Japan-US alliance, the country steadily increased its defense arsenal, reducing its reliance on the US military. Abe's plan to revise Article 9 of Japan's pacifist constitution and increase its military budget raised concerns both at home and abroad. With the COVID-19 pandemic, analysts say the fruits of Abenomics have been considerably reduced, raising debate over Abe's legacy. With economic recovery still stagnant, many unsolved issues with neighbors, and relations with the US not as strong as before, constitutional revision has not made any progress. Japanese media say with all these challenges, Abe's successor might be drawing the short straw. Terence Teoshima, CGTN, Tokyo.
The United States economy contracted at an upwardly revised annual rate of 31.7% in the second quarter of this year. U.S. Commerce Department attributed the decline to decreases in personal consumption, expenditures, exports, and non-residential fixed investment. The service industry, the hardest hit by the coronavirus pandemic, plunged 43.1% in the second quarter. The initial jobless claims in the United States last week totaled more than 1 million for the second straight week, painting a gloomy outlook for the recovery of a labor market ravaged by the COVID-19 crisis. Now, the U.S. Federal Reserve says it plans on keeping its interest rates near zero even after inflation has exceeded the Fed's 2% target level. The change signifies that the Fed is prepared to tolerate a higher level of inflation than it generally has in the past. It also means that borrowing rates for households and businesses for everything from auto loans and home mortgages to corporate expansion will likely remain ultra low for years to come.
In addition, we have not changed our view that a longer-run inflation rate of 2% is most consistent with our mandate to promote both maximum employment and price stability. Finally, we continue to believe that monetary policy must be forward-looking, taking into account the expectations of households and businesses and the lags in monetary policy's effect on the economy. Thus, our policy actions continue to depend on the economic outlook as well as the risks to the outlook by reducing our scope to support the economy by cutting interest rates. The lower bound increases downward risks to employment and inflation. To counter these risks, we are prepared to use our full range of tools to support the economy.
Walmart is partnering with Microsoft in the software maker's bid for ByteDance-owned TikTok. The world's largest retailer said TikTok's integrated e-commerce and advertising capabilities in other markets is a clear benefit to creators and users in those markets. ByteDance has been in talks to sell TikTok's North American, Australian and New Zealand operations, which could be worth $25 billion to $30 billion to companies including Microsoft and Oracle. This comes after U.S. President Donald Trump demanded that China's ByteDance, which owns TikTok globally, sell its U.S. operations, citing potential national security risk due to the vast amount of private data the app is compiling on U.S. consumers. The UK government plans to push people to return to offices and other workplaces where it is safe to do so. This is in an attempt to assist in the recovery of the economy, which has suffered a massive 20% contraction due to the global coronavirus pandemic. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is now expected to launch a campaign lauding the virtues of returning to the offices and providing reassurance that it is a safe place. A new online tool will also help people avoid the most crowded trains and buses. According to reports, only 17% of workers in British cities had returned to their workplaces by early August. This in turn underscores the challenge facing Johnson in steering the country away from the coronavirus shutdown.
Where it's possible, people can now return to work. It's safe to do so. Your employer should have put in COVID-friendly or COVID-unfriendly, I suppose you could say, measures to ensure that people can work safely from their offices, because there are just things which are impossible to do from home over Zoom videos as we're doing now. So yes, gradually now people will start to return to the office, but I suspect we'll see more flexible working than we've seen in the past, and it will be for employers and employees to work out the right balance in their particular cases.
Ahead of the upcoming International Fair for Trade in Services in China next month, we turn to 5G. Let's see how the technology is developing in the country and its prospects for the future. CGTN's Zheng Yibing has the details.
5G is rapidly developing in China, transforming ideas from concepts into reality. One example is self-driving cars based on 5G networks. 3 years after road tests first started, China is already among the world's top 5 countries for industry partnerships involving autonomous vehicles, and the technology is believed to have huge market potential. It's a familiar trend across many sectors, especially since 5G was launched commercially in China last year. 5G services now reach over 150 million users in the country, the world's highest. That number is estimated to exceed 200 million by the end of the year. But the telecom sector is only the tip of the iceberg. The development of 5G has been on show during China's fight against COVID-19. And the tech is now used in hospitals, offices, and in long-distance education. And its path to the future is paved by the newest global 5G standards agreed to by China and other countries in early July. So what's 5G's potential in the world's most populous country?
It's estimated that by 2025, total investments in constructing 5G networks will reach 1.2 trillion yuan. It will give impetus to investments across the entire industrial chain and draw investments of over 3.5 trillion yuan.
Critics say it could take a long time before the huge sums initially poured into the technology return a profit. But many are optimistic.
As an important part of new infrastructure, 5G is greatly contributing to the stability and smooth running of industrial and supply chains. This is different from the past and will be important for the development of high-quality industry in the future.
5G-related exports from Chinese companies currently face a tough international environment. But the country has played a key role in developing the technology. Take the latest global 5G standards for example. Chinese companies have taken the lead in making almost 40% of them. And China has built some 400,000 5G base stations nationwide, including those in out-of-the-way areas like the world's tallest peak, Chomolungma. That number will exceed 600,000 by the end of the year, more than half of the world's total. Experts say China has taken precautions against potential risks and implemented cybersecurity measures for 5G technology. They believe the smarter future is on the horizon, so let's fasten our seatbelts and get ready. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Beijing.
China's beer sales have fully recovered in summer. The pandemic shut down bars at the beginning of the year, but brewery sales have risen since May along with the temperature. And it turns out the improved sales are being driven by more than just the boys' nights out. Chen Tong reports.
Who wouldn't love a tall, cool one in the summer heat? One of the season's best friends for sure is beer.
It's always nice to enjoy some cold beer on a summer night. With the pandemic under control here, beer sales at this bar in downtown Shanghai have fully recovered.
We are selling 120 liters every night. It's only getting better since the pandemic. 120 or 150 customers a night.
The bars are not alone. Convenience store chain Bianlifeng's beer sales in July were up 20% from the previous month. Now, that's not unusual in the summer. Beer consumption is a very seasonal thing. But this year, it turns out that a major contributor to the fourth-year sales is women. The number of women purchasing beer is up nearly 30% from the same period last year.
I'll have a beer at least once a week, sometimes with a snack.
It's relaxing to have a beer with my friends.
Bianlifeng says one element attracting the ladies to the lager is the increasing number of flavors on offer. There are certainly plenty here.
There are more beer flavors with low alcohol content now, like raspberry and peach. Women buyers like these flavors, and the cans look pretty, very appealing to a young lady.
And brewers have noticed. Budweiser set up a special team at the beginning of the year, specifically to study women's beer purchases. The company figures 30% of its buyers are now women, a minority, but it's increasing every summer. And so it's been launching more appealing beer flavors, with packaging to match.
Women consumers have many faces. They buy beer for themselves, but also for their friends and families. They'd also like to share their feelings on the internet, to take photos and share them on social media. They're good patrons for e-commerce and online group buying. So we've launched products that meet women's demands in flavors and packaging. We're planning to launch more.
All this only makes the battle of the breweries bigger. In addition to Budweiser, domestic brands including Yanjing and Zhujiang are also coming out with wheat-flavored beer. In 2019, consumption of fruit-flavored beer reached 265,000 liters, 5% more than the previous year. And for the beer makers, that's something to cheer about. Chen Tong, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Let's go through the commodity markets, and oil prices inched lower today as Hurricane Laura passed the heart of the U.S. oil industry in Louisiana and Texas without causing any widespread damage. Companies were also beginning to restart operations. Brent crude futures for October set to expire today were down 11 cents to $44.98 a barrel by 1500 GMT. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude fell 18 cents to $42.86 a barrel. Both benchmarks were on track for weekly gains of about 1.3%, with WTI headed for a fourth straight weekly rise. The benchmarks hit 5-month highs early in the week as U.S. producers cut crude output ahead of Laura at a rate close to the level of 2005's Hurricane Katrina. Coming up after the break. The indigenous company driving telemedicine in Nigeria and enabling safe interactions during the coronavirus pandemic.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys. The greatest sights. The greatest adventures.
Here in Peninah, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Many people in Nigeria, as in other countries, nowadays avoid visiting hospitals for fear of contracting the coronavirus. Health workers are also wary of attending to patients over similar concerns. But an indigenous tech health company in West African nation is helping healthcare workers and patients interact safely. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam has that story.
Yvonne Ndukwe has been dealing with bouts of malaria. But visiting a hospital for treatment hasn't been an option since the coronavirus outbreak. She recently got an alternative, a telemedicine platform that enables her to communicate with a doctor. The platform also links her with a pharmacy around her neighborhood from where she gets her drugs, and the service costs about $2 monthly.
I registered with 3,000 naira for 3 months, and I mean that is really affordable. Imagine for the next 3 months I get access to malaria test and treatment, and then I also get an opportunity to chat with the doctors.
We receive prescriptions for patients who have visited an online doctor. Then we fill the prescriptions and ensure that the drugs that we give the clients or the patients or customer is exactly what was prescribed, and we tell them how to take it.
The platform also covers chronic health conditions.
What happens is we have this set of symptoms. We have an algorithm that we use. We have an algorithm that we follow depending on what the patient complains about. And with this, we're able to make a diagnosis. Now, if the complaints they have are not one of the diagnoses covered by the telemedicine app, maybe it's one of those that would need a specialist recommendation. We offer them a referral template, like a referral letter, which they can take to another facility or a clinic.
The platform is the brainchild of health tech firm Wella Health, alongside its health insurance partner, Reliance. It's a pathway that's helping thousands of Nigerians access quality health care from the comfort of their homes. The partnership has served over 4,000 patients since it was launched some 50 days ago.
So it's really simple to use. It's just the same way you can chat with your friend or your colleagues at work. Just pick up your phone and talk to them via text messaging. For people who aren't technologically savvy or do not have a smartphone, We also have the facility to connect you via voice to a doctor. It's value for everybody involved. There's value for the patient. They don't have to go to a hospital. They don't have to wait on long queues. They just talk to a doctor, pick up their medications.
The telemedicine app was launched in the height of the pandemic. Because of the lockdown, people could not go out. People were scared. A lot of people had this panic about the pandemic, and hospitals were also very, very cautious about who comes into the clinic and who they attend to. So at that period, we were able to provide like maximum value to all our users to minimize the number of hospital visits that happened in that period.
Nigeria's fragile healthcare system has been badly affected by the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. Reports from the Bureau of Statistics show that about 82 million people live below the poverty line of $1 per day. That's about 40% of the country's population. Now, the telemedicine platform seeks to increase access to healthcare for middle to low-income earners. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
A group of women and youths are weaving their way out of poverty in Kenya's Turkana County by crafting exquisite baskets and hearts into precious decorations and home use items. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moi reports.
This is Turkana Handcraft based in Kenya's Lodwar town, approximately 510 kilometers north of the country's capital, Nairobi. The craft center is part of a growing 82-member group that produces crafts that are sold within and without the county. But since the outbreak of the coronavirus, business has been slow.
When Corona came, even the people who used to come from out of the county to buy our products ceased to come because of restrictions on movement.
We don't have gardens. We have nothing, and the goats we have are far away in the village. Some of us who live in the town are simply suffering.
Using their practiced hands, the women here turn dried reeds into precious items like mats and baskets that are sold to earn a living.
This project aims to support women and youth groups in terms of their current reality, touching on social, economic, environmental, and HIV and AIDS, among other issues.
This work requires strength, and the women need some stipend that can help them survive during these hard times. Because if they work and there are no customers and sales are low, they are in trouble.
Despite the disruptions caused by the coronavirus outbreak, the women still perceive their basket weaving as a business helping to better their lives. Akolong Crafts is another youth initiative set up to help disadvantaged young men and women.
The youth that works here get something at the end of the day, and they have something to do. They don't just go doing bad things, like they are busy and they know at the end of the day they will have something to eat. And that's why this project was started.
These young people are struggling to survive in a semi-desert area. Many of them rely on famine relief assistance for survival. The center is helping them to work on beaded items as a means to assist in buying the very basic items they stand in need. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Turkana, Kenya.
Finally, let's have a look at the currency. South Africa's rand surged against the dollar today as the U.S. currency fell heavily and global investors hunted for higher-yielding assets in emerging markets. At 1500 GMT, the rand traded at 16.63 per dollar. That's roughly 2.5% firmer than its close on Thursday. Data this week pointed to a modest pickup in price pressures in Africa's most industrialized economy, and this adds to signs that the central bank may bring a recent series of rate cuts to a close. The rand's gains came despite data showing an $8 billion budget deficit in July, and research from a science council showing 2020 had seen the worst power cuts on record. And with that, we come to a close tonight of Global Business. Would love to hear from you. Send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. I'm Peninah Karibe. Thank you for watching.